Dr. Peterson, this already is a wide-ranging discussion, but before we delve a little deeper, I cannot resist but share perhaps a lighter side to my career. Because in Brazil, I've become quite known for my talent in voice impressions, voice impersonations. And it's a curious claim to fame, for sure.
Yeah, it's a good one, though.
It's a good one.
It's a good one, yeah.
And if I may, with all, I mean, I don't want to sound pretentious here at all.
Well, if you're going to imitate me, you're going to sound pretentious.
We'll get there. But I believe that imitation touches, and I've done my own introspection on this subject matter.
Yeah.
It touches on fundamental issues like identity and self-recognition.
Yeah, definitely.
At some point in life, we've all grappled with that quintessential question: to be or not to be. That is the question. So, I mean, we invest so much into our own egos that when we see another person able to mimic us and emulate our gesticulations and our voices, it's almost like a theft that doesn't actually take nothing away. Yeah. That's my take on it. Yeah. But
definitely.
I would love to hear.
That's why we imitate.
For sure. But we, at least from my studies, I believe it comes from way back into Aristotle's and the mimetic, the study of mimesis back in the day.
Yes, definitely.
So it really, I want to hear, I'm dying to hear your take on this from a psychological viewpoint. Why do these impressions captivate people so much and have captivated them throughout millennia?
Oh, no, I think you put your finger on it already. Right. Well, look, one of the things that really characterizes human beings, probably more than our capacity for language. First of all, language is a mimetic function. Mm-hmm. Well, we use the same words, right? So we're imitating. If you speak the same language as someone else, there's an imitation there because you share the same words, you share the same linguistic patterns. And so without the ability to imitate, there'd be no language. Imitation is more fundamental to the human mode of existence, even than language. And that's really saying something. And what we do when we're very sophisticated in our capacity to imitate, because if I watch you do something, I can copy it, which means I can learn what you know without paying the whole price that you paid. Mm-hmm. But then it's more than that. If you watch a child, for example, imitate his father in a game, say a game of house with a girl, mm-hmm. he doesn't duplicate his father. He does something much more sophisticated, is he watches his father across many different situations, and he extracts out the central pattern of fatherhood, and then he imitates that mm-hmm. and plays it, right? It's very sophisticated. And that's what the religious enterprise is to some degree, because we created Well, imagine that people will tell each other interesting stories, mm-hmm. right? Okay, so what that means is that there's a kind of story that's interesting and a kind of story that isn't. Mm-hmm. All right, so an interesting story, you could say an interesting story captures something that could and should be imitated. It's worth passing on. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now it's a distillation process. If I tell an interesting story about you, I don't describe everything you did. I describe something interesting you did that's worth imitating. Okay, so now imagine I'm a great novelist, and I can take a whole sequence of descriptions of interesting things, and I can abstract out of that the most interesting thing, which would also be the thing you should imitate most. Well, that's what happens in the development of religion. Mm-hmm. So Christ is portrayed in Christian tradition, for example, as the King of Kings. Okay, so what that means something. It's not just a declarative statement. What it means is something like this. Imagine that there are genuine kings of men, and I don't necessarily mean arbitrary political figures. I mean, there's an admirable sports figure, and there's an admirable leader, and there's an admirable musician, and there's an admirable plumber, and there's an admirable grandfather. And the thing that unites all of them is, so they're kings in their domain. The thing that unites all of them is that proclivity to be admirable. Okay, imagine now you extract that out as a central tendency. Okay, that's what is represented by the Passion of Christ. It's the pattern that makes the great kings great. And so what's the pattern? It's a weird inversion, because in the classical world, a great hero would be a dominant, high-status individual. Okay, and there's some truth in that, because it's better to be a dominant, high-status individual than a craven coward. And so you could get the military hero that way. Mm-hmm. But then you might say, well, is the military hero the highest form of admirable? And the answer would be no, because there's an obvious flaw in the military hero, which is the necessity of death, let's say. What might be the heroic pattern that's higher than that? Well, that's what's attempting to be portrayed in the Christian passion. It's the willingness to take on the whole burden of existence and to make the most dramatic possible sacrifice in the service of the highest goal. And that is, so the Christian calling is to, it's not to belief in Christ. That's not right. Not like a declarative statement. It's a call to imitation. So what do you imitate? What's the imitation of Christ? So what is that? It's the imitation of that ultimate self-sacrificial pattern that the community is necessarily founded on, right? So that's how, so why do we like impressions? Well, because it's a celebration of imitation, right? And,
Yep.
and imitation is...
It's an homage. It's sort of an,
absolutely.
It's sort of an homage.
And it's a demonstration of that talent.